The night shift at Cedar Falls Police Station had begun like any other, quiet, almost painfully so. Rain tapped lightly against the windows, tracing streaks down the glass. Inside, the hum of fluorescent lights mingled with the occasional clatter of typing from Officer Daniel Reyes, who sat hunched over a half-empty cup of cold coffee. He yawned, shoulders stiff from hours behind the desk, and tried to stay alert by scrolling through last week's incident reports. It was the kind of night that made your ears prick at the faintest sound, the kind of night where even a car door slamming 2 blocks away felt like a gunshot. Reyes had almost drifted into a dazing state when the sound came. Not the usual police radio chatter, not the squeak of boots on the linoleum floor, but the automatic sliding doors at the front of the station. They opened with a sharp whoosh. Reyes' head snapped up. No one was there, or so he thought. Then he saw it. A small, trembling German Shepherd puppy, soaked to the bone from the rain, stood in the entryway. Its fur clung to its tiny body, dark streaks of mud streaking across its legs. Its eyes were wide, dark, and impossibly terrified, glistening under the harsh fluorescent lights. The puppy didn't bark. It didn't whine. It just stared. And then, with an almost human-like determination, it took a few careful steps into the station. Every officer in the room froze. Even veteran officers, the ones who had faced armed robbers and domestic disputes, exchanged glances of disbelief. Reyes slowly stood, his chair scraping against the tile floor. "Hey, buddy," he said softly, extending a hand. The puppy took 3 more shaky steps, and then collapsed onto the floor. Reyes' stomach twisted. Something was wrong. The little dog was hurt badly. He rushed over, kneeling beside the pup. Its breathing was shallow, and one of its front paws seemed twisted at an unnatural angle. As he gently lifted it, his eyes caught a blood-stained strip of cloth tied loosely around the puppy's neck. The letters were smudged, barely legible. Reyes' heart skipped a beat as he read the words. "Please, she's still there." He froze, staring at the note as if it were a punch to the gut. The room went quiet except for the soft patter of rain outside and the low whine of the puppy. The other officers were hesitant. "Should we call animal control?" one asked, voice tight. Reyes shook his head, gripping the tiny body closer. "No, not yet. This isn't just a stray. This little guy, he came for help, and he's telling us something." The puppy nuzzled against Reyes' chest, shivering violently. Reyes noticed the faint smell of smoke and the lingering tang of something burnt, almost metallic. He looked down at the tiny dog, chest tightening. "He's been through something terrible," he murmured. One of the officers, a younger woman named Lopez, whispered, "It looks like he's been burned." Reyes nodded grimly. His mind raced. A blood-stained note tied around a small dog's neck, "Burns," and a cryptic message pleading for help. "This isn't random," he said, his voice low but carrying an authority that quieted the room. "Someone's in trouble, and this puppy, he's the only one who could get here." Without another word, Reyes carefully untied the cloth, revealing a tiny, soaked and battered piece of paper underneath. On the back, scribbled in shaky letters, was an address, one that sent a chill down his spine, an abandoned housing area on the edge of town. Condemned after a fire months ago, the buildings had been empty, left to rot, and considered off-limits to the public. He felt the puppy tense against his chest. Its small body shook violently. Reyes' mind flashed back to the note. She's still there. Time had become a blur. Every second mattered. "Unit 5, get a cruiser ready. We're going to the address on this note," he barked into his radio, trying to keep his voice calm despite the pounding in his chest. The puppy whimpered softly, leaning closer as if it understood that help was finally on the way. Reyes gently lifted him into his coat, cradling him like a fragile bundle of hope. He glanced at the other officers who had fallen silent, their faces pale. Everyone knew, without saying it, that this was no ordinary call. The drive to the abandoned housing area was tense. Rain lashed against the windshield, creating streaks that distorted the streetlight's glow. Reyes kept glancing down at the puppy, whose eyes were wide and alert, scanning the world as though expecting danger at every corner. The tiny creature's paw throbbed visibly, and Reyes could see faint smoke residue in its fur. It was then that the puppy did something that made Reyes' chest tighten even further. It lifted its head and let out a soft, almost imperceptible whine, directing its gaze toward the horizon. Reyes followed the look, and a sense of dread settled over him. The abandoned buildings loomed ahead, skeletal shells of what they once were. Burnt timbers jutted out at odd angles, and the air smelled of wet ash and mildew. There were no lights, no signs of life, except for that soft whine echoing from within the ruins. Reyes parked the cruiser and grabbed his flashlight, tucking the puppy carefully under his arm. The puppy struggled briefly, then went still, as if sensing he needed to conserve strength. Every step Reyes took toward the first building made the floorboards creak beneath his boots. He could feel his heartbeat in his ears. He called out, "Police! Anyone in there, can you hear me?" Only silence answered. Then, almost imperceptibly, a faint cough, human, weak, almost childlike, echoed back. Reyes froze. He pressed the flashlight in the direction of the sound. Shadows danced across the walls, jagged shapes of collapsed beams and burned furniture. The puppy's ears twitched. He whimpered once, then nudged toward the source of the sound, urging Reyes to follow. Reyes' stomach knotted. Whoever, or whatever, was in there, they needed him. And they had only the courage of a tiny, frightened puppy to reach out for help. He took another step, then another, heart racing. The faint cough grew slightly louder. He crawled under a fallen beam, careful not to destabilize it. And there, huddled against a charred wall, barely moving, was a small child, soot covering her face, tears streaked with ash. Her eyes met his, wide with fear. "Help," she whispered, voice trembling. The puppy squirmed in Reyes' arms, pressing forward as if trying to comfort her. He set the puppy down gently, and it crawled to the girl, nudging her hand with its cold, wet nose. She reached out instinctively, wrapping her tiny fingers around the puppy's soaked fur. Reyes felt a lump in his throat. The reality of what had happened hit him. This child had been trapped in a fire alone, and the only thing that had run for help was a small German Shepherd puppy. The rain outside hammered harder. The wind howled through the broken windows. The child shivered. The puppy stayed beside her, his body tense but protective. Reyes radioed in for paramedics, urgency creeping into his voice. "We have a live victim. Small child, burn injuries, possibly trapped for hours. Send everything you've got." As he waited, kneeling in the soot and ash, he looked down at the puppy. Its eyes met his, filled with a strange, almost human intelligence. "You did good, buddy," he whispered. "You got her help." The puppy's tail thumped weakly once, a small, exhausted heartbeat of relief and triumph. And Reyes knew, deep in his bones, that the night was far from over, and the story this little puppy had started was just beginning. The question that haunted him as sirens screamed closer: who had left the child here? And why? The wail of sirens pierced the rainy night as the paramedics' lights swept over the abandoned housing area. The small, skeletal building seemed even more foreboding now, its burned walls a silent witness to horror. Officer Daniel Reyes stayed crouched beside the little girl, his hand resting gently on her arm. She flinched at the cold metal of the paramedic's stretcher, but the puppy, Rex, as Reyes had begun to call him, stayed close, his small body pressing against her, offering the only warmth she had known in hours. Reyes' eyes flicked to the strip of cloth that had been tied around Rex's neck. Now that the initial shock had worn off, he could see it more clearly. The letters were uneven, almost childlike and smeared from the rain. "Please, she's still there." But the backside was even more chilling. A hastily scrawled address, the ink smudged and almost unreadable, pointed to a location no one in the station would have dared enter on a normal night. These weren't just abandoned houses, they were ruins, remnants of a fire that had left them condemned. Nobody went there unless they had a reason, and clearly, whoever wrote this note had a terrifying one. Reyes crouched, holding Rex close. "You did good," he whispered. The puppy licked his hand, shivering, but his eyes, those intense, pleading eyes, never left Reyes. It was as if he knew every second counted. "Dispatch," Reyes said into his radio, keeping his voice steady despite the adrenaline surging through him. "We need a unit at 24 Briar Street. Possible trapped child. Send fire and paramedics. Repeat, child in abandoned, fire-damaged structure." While he waited for confirmation, Reyes examined Rex more carefully. Burn marks streaked the fur on his paws and ears. The tiniest scratches ran across his nose. Smoke clung to him, heavy and pungent. He was a survivor, just barely, but he had done something incredible. He had run through the storm, through streets slick with rain, all for one purpose: to save a child he didn't even know. The paramedics arrived and gently lifted the girl onto a stretcher. She whimpered, clutching Rex as if letting go would mean the end of hope itself. Reyes helped lift Rex into the front seat of the cruiser so he wouldn't be left behind. The puppy resisted briefly, weak but determined, then lay against the warm seat, his eyes darting toward the girl, always watching. As the ambulance and police cruisers sped toward the hospital, Reyes couldn't shake the images in his mind. A tiny child trapped in rubble, alone in a fire, and a little German shepherd running for help. And the message on that cloth. Whoever had done this, whoever had left her there, had deliberately counted on Rex to find someone. At the hospital, nurses and doctors moved swiftly. The girl, Emily, barely conscious, was whisked into trauma care. Reyes stayed with Rex, gently placing him in a quiet recovery room, where a vet had been called in to treat his burns and exhaustion. Rex whimpered softly but remained still enough for the examination. The vet, Dr. Lillian Chang, frowned. This little guy been through hell. Burns on the paws, ears, minor smoke inhalation. He's lucky to be alive. But the real question is, why was he out there in the first place? Reyes told her about the note, his voice steady but tight with emotion. He didn't wander. He ran for help, and he carried a message about a child trapped in a burned building. Dr. Chang's eyes widened. "That's extraordinary. Dogs don't do this unless there's a bond or some kind of extraordinary instinct. He must have known she was in danger." Reyes nodded, watching Rex lick the vet's hand briefly as if trying to reassure her. He knew. That's the scary part. Meanwhile, in trauma, Emily's vitals stabilized, but her eyes remained closed, her tiny chest rising in shallow breaths. Reyes stayed by Rex's side, whispering to him, as if the little dog could understand his every word. Hours passed. Dawn crept across the city, rain giving way to fog. The news had already picked up the story, footage of Rex being carried by Reyes into the hospital, small, soaked, trembling, but alive. Social media exploded. Headlines flashed. Puppy hero SAVS child. Tiny German shepherd races to police station for help. People shared it, commented, cried. The city had fallen in love with Rex, but inside the hospital the truth was far darker. Emily was still unconscious. The circumstances of her being trapped remained unclear, and Reyes couldn't shake the feeling that the danger was far from over. Hours later, detectives arrived to examine the scene at the abandoned housing area. Reyes accompanied them, bringing along Rex in a small carrier. The fire had been intentionally set, investigators confirmed, and the charred remains of furniture and debris suggested that Emily had barely survived. "They left her there," said Detective Morales grimly. "Not just trapped, abandoned. Somebody wanted her gone." Reyes' hands tightened around Rex. The puppy whined softly, as if echoing the officer's own sense of helplessness. Morales continued, "Look at this." He held up a charred piece of paper recovered from the rubble, almost completely destroyed but still legible in places. Names, scribbles, dates, a pattern emerging. Reyes leaned in, heart hammering. Among the debris they found small, torn clothing remnants, a backpack, and something that looked like a notebook. The notebook was partially melted, pages fused together, but one page, carefully pried apart, revealed a scrawled note. "If anyone finds her, follow Rex. He will lead you, trust him." Ray's stomach dropped. Emily hadn't just been abandoned in a fire. Someone had deliberately relied on Rex to get help. The thought that a tiny German shepherd was the child's only hope sent a shiver down his spine. Back at the hospital, Emily's parents, finally located, arrived, faces pale and tear-streaked. They froze when they saw Rex, sitting quietly beside Ray's, fur still damp, eyes wide but alert. "This he?" Emily's mother whispered, voice breaking. "Yes," Ray said. "He ran to the station for help. He saved her." The mother's knees buckled. She fell to the floor, tears streaming. "My baby." Rex pressed his nose into Emily's hand as she lay unconscious, and the tiny tail thumped weakly. Even through the exhaustion, the puppy seemed to understand the gravity of what he had done. The police department released a statement that morning, and the city buzzed with emotion. People couldn't stop talking about Rex. He had become a symbol: courage, loyalty, and hope in the face of unimaginable danger. But while the city celebrated, Ray's remained focused on the darker truth. Who had left Emily in that fire? And why did they rely on a puppy to get help? It wasn't over. Because somewhere out there, the person responsible was watching the story unfold, and they weren't worried. They had counted on one thing: that Rex, brave as he was, couldn't do it twice. But Rex wasn't just brave. He was relentless. And Ray's knew that the next step, finding who had done this, was only the beginning. He knelt beside the tiny German shepherd, gently scratching behind his ears. "We're not done yet," he whispered. "You're not done yet. We're going to find them, I promise." Rex leaned into him, eyes wide and unblinking, almost as if he understood every word. And in that silent, powerful connection, Ray's felt the weight of the coming battle, one that wouldn't just test the city's police department, but the courage of a tiny, four-legged hero. The night outside the hospital was quiet now, deceptive in its calm. But Ray's couldn't shake the feeling that the true danger hadn't revealed itself yet. And somewhere, waiting in the shadows, was a person who underestimated the smallest, bravest hero in the city. The question remained, heavy and unyielding: who had left Emily in the fire, and would they try again? The rain had finally eased, leaving the streets slick and gleaming under the weak morning light. Officer Daniel Reyes parked the cruiser at the edge of the abandoned housing area, eyes scanning the skeletal remains of the burnt duplexes. The air smelled of ash and decay, and the silence was almost suffocating. A fog crept through the ruins, clinging to the blackened walls and twisted beams. Every step Reyes took toward the first building made his boots squeak against the soaked ground. Rex, the German shepherd puppy, sat quietly in his carrier, wet fur matted against his small body. His eyes, wide and alert, darted to every shadow. Reyes had learned over the last hours that this wasn't just instinct, it was purpose. Rex had led him here for a reason. The first building was more of a skeleton than a home now. Burnt wood jutted out at odd angles. Smoke stains marked the walls in patterns that suggested chaos. Reyes called out as he stepped over debris. "Police! Anyone in there? We have help coming." For a long moment there was only silence. Then a faint sound. A cough, weak and trembling, carried through the ruined hallways. Reyes froze. That was it. That single noise confirmed everything. Emily was here. She was alive. He followed the sound carefully, flashlight slicing through the shadows. Every beam revealed twisted furniture, ash-covered toys, and pieces of what once might have been a home. But nothing else moved, except the faint shiver of fear that seemed to hang in the air. Then, under a fallen beam that had trapped part of the ceiling, Ray saw her. Emily. Covered in soot, her tiny body curled protectively as if shielding herself from a world that had betrayed her. Her eyes fluttered open when she saw him, wide and terrified. "Help, please," she whispered, barely audible over the rain and the creaking debris. Rex, sensing her, squirmed out of the carrier, paws slipping on the wet floor, and crawled toward her. He nudged her hand, his small, wet nose pressing gently against her soot-streaked face. She managed a weak smile, her fingers curling around his damp fur. It was almost miraculous how a tiny puppy could give a child the courage to survive hours of fear and isolation. Reyes moved quickly, crouching beside her. "It's okay, Emily. You're safe now. I've got you," he said softly, trying not to alarm her. He reached to lift her, but as he did, something caught his eye, a shadow moving in the corner of the room. He froze, heart pounding. Emily clutched Rex tighter, sensing the tension. Reyes swung his flashlight toward the corner, and then he saw it, a man's boot sticking out from under the rubble. The pulse in Reyes' ears doubled. He had been trained for danger, but nothing could have prepared him for this. He approached slowly, voice firm but calm. "If you're in there, show yourself." The man groaned and rolled slightly, a burned, soot-covered adult male, unconscious but breathing. Reyes called for backup, and a team arrived within minutes, carefully extracting the man from the ruins. But what shocked everyone wasn't just that he was there, it was what he was carrying. In his backpack were charred remnants of documents and photos. Among them, Reyes recognized Emily immediately. These weren't just family photos, they were part of something darker. Documents marked with names, addresses, and dates. It seemed meticulously planned. Rex whined softly, stepping closer to Emily. The tiny puppy's instincts didn't fail. He stayed alert, scanning the shadows as if warning Reyes that this man wasn't finished yet. The medics arrived, taking Emily and the man to separate ambulances. The girl was stabilized, though bruised and exhausted. Reyes stayed close to Rex, whose small body leaned against his leg, exhausted but vigilant. In the following hours, investigators pieced together the horrifying truth. The fire had been deliberately set, a trap designed to leave Emily behind. The man under the rubble had been involved, but the exact sequence of events remained unclear. Whoever orchestrated this had counted on Emily being isolated, and had perhaps not anticipated a tiny German shepherd would be intelligent and brave enough to run for help. Detective Morales examined the scene carefully. "Look at this," he said, pointing to a scorched piece of notebook paper clinging to a beam. "Someone planned this. The fire, the rubble, it wasn't a simple accident, and whoever it was, they expected her to die or remain trapped." Reyes' stomach twisted. Then Rex saved her life. Morales nodded grimly. "The only reason she survived is because this dog did exactly what he was supposed to do: run, find help, and get someone to act. This dog is a hero, plain and simple." Back at the hospital, Emily woke briefly, eyes wet and heavy. She reached for Rex instinctively. The puppy licked her hand, his own tiny form trembling from exhaustion and injury. The connection between them was undeniable, almost supernatural. Reyes watched silently. It was rare that a bond between human and animal could carry the weight of survival like this, but Rex had done it. And yet, he knew the danger was far from over. The man rescued from the rubble refused to speak at first. When he finally muttered words, they chilled everyone in the room. "She should have stayed there," he said hoarsely. "No one needed to know." Detective Morales froze. "What do you mean?" The man only groaned again, exhausted, burned, and incoherent. But the implication was clear. Emily's life had been deliberately threatened, and someone had orchestrated it with chilling precision. Rex, sensing the tension, growled softly, the first sound he had made since running into the station. His ears were perked, eyes locked on the man. Reyes felt the tiny puppy's warning as if it were his own instinct. Hours later, once Emily was stabilized, Reyes stayed by her side. He gently stroked Rex's fur. "You did everything you could, buddy. You saved her," he whispered. Rex leaned against him, exhausted but aware, as if acknowledging that his mission was far from over. The city had begun to learn Rex's name. Social media buzzed with images of the wet, soot-covered puppy who had run through rain and rubble to save a child. But the story didn't capture the darkness lurking beneath the headlines. The calculated plan to trap Emily, the man who had almost succeeded, or the sense that someone else might still be watching. Ray's phone buzzed. It was Detective Morales. "We've identified the man," Morales said. "He's connected to Emily's mother's ex-boyfriend, dangerous, violent history, restraining orders, and he wasn't acting alone." Ray's stomach dropped. The fire was just the beginning. Whoever had done this might return, and if they did, would Rex be enough to save her again? The tiny German shepherd lay at Ray's feet, scarred, wet, and trembling, but his eyes were still bright and unwavering. He had already proven himself a hero, but the true test of courage, against a human adversary this time, was still ahead. Ray's knelt and gently scratched behind Rex's ears. "We'll be ready," he whispered. "Whatever comes next, we'll face it together." And somewhere in the shadows, the people who had tried to destroy Emily's life were watching, unaware that the smallest hero in Cedar Falls was already prepared to fight back. The hospital's fluorescent lights were harsh and unyielding, casting a cold glow over the tiny room where Emily lay asleep, hooked to monitors and IV lines. Officer Daniel Reyes sat beside her, his gaze flicking between the girl and Rex, the small German shepherd who had become more than just a puppy. He was a symbol of hope, courage, and raw, instinctive heroism. Hours had passed since the fire, yet the questions remained. Who had left Emily trapped in the abandoned duplex? Why had they chosen that night, that building, that moment? And most importantly, how had Rex known exactly where to go? The answers began to reveal themselves when Detective Morales arrived with a small evidence bag, his face grim. "We found this," he said, placing the bag on the bedside table. Inside were charred remnants of a notebook, a half-burned phone, and hospital discharge papers. Reyes leaned forward, squinting. The name on the documents didn't match any missing persons report. Something was off. "She's been off the radar," Morales said quietly. "No school notifications, no social services alerts, nothing. Whoever left her there didn't want anyone to notice she existed." Emily stirred, weakly opening her eyes. When she saw Reyes and Rex, a small, flickering smile appeared on her soot-streaked face. She whispered, hoarse but determined, "He told Rex to run." Reyes froze. "He?" Emily's tiny hand pointed feebly toward Rex, who was already sitting alert, watching her intently. Reyes realized the truth instantly. Someone else had been with her in that building. Someone who had somehow trained, guided, or trusted Rex to bring help. Dr. Chang, the vet, checked on Rex's injuries. "Burns are healing, but he's exhausted. He's been through a lot, more than most adult dogs could survive." She gently stroked his head. "And yet he still kept going. That's extraordinary." Reyes knelt beside the bed, studying Emily. "Do you remember who was with you?" he asked softly. Emily shook her head slightly, tears brimming in her eyes. He said I had to stay safe, told me to wait. Then he went away." The room went silent. Morales exhaled slowly. This wasn't random. Someone deliberately planned this, and Emily survived only because that puppy acted faster than anyone else could. As Emily drifted back to a fragile sleep, Ray's phone buzzed. It was the precinct photos from the abandoned building. They had found more evidence: small footprints in ash, pieces of torn clothing, a burned family photo. The photo was smudged but recognizable. Emily's mother, smiling with a man whose face was almost completely obscured. "This is her mother's ex-boyfriend," Morales said, pointing to the image. "He's violent. He has a history of stalking. He ignored restraining orders, and he wasn't acting alone." Ray's stomach twisted. The fire, the trap, the cryptic instructions to Rex, they weren't just acts of cruelty. They were calculated, deliberate, and possibly part of something much bigger. As they sifted through the burned remnants, They found a tiny, folded piece of paper hidden beneath the debris. It read, almost poetically, "If anyone finds her, follow Rex. He will lead you, trust him." Reyes held the paper in his hand, reading it again and again. Every time he did, the weight of the situation sank deeper. The puppy hadn't just wandered for help. He had been tasked with a mission, entrusted with a child's life, and he had executed it perfectly. Rex, sensing the gravity of the moment, nudged Rey's hand. The tiny tail thumped weakly once, a heartbeat of reassurance amidst chaos. The media had already picked up the story. Photos of Rex, wet and covered in ash, carrying Emily to safety, spread like wildfire. Headlines celebrated the hero dog. Social media erupted with hashtags. Rex the Rescuer. Puppy saves child. Hero dog. But behind the viral fame, Reyes knew the real story was darker. Whoever had left Emily in that fire was still out there. Whoever had orchestrated this had anticipated chaos, trusted a tiny puppy to bridge the gap, and had possibly planned for a second act. Detective Morales looked up from the evidence table. "We've got him identified, the ex-boyfriend, but we also know he has connections, people he can manipulate, people who might want Emily harmed for reasons we don't yet understand." Rey's hand tightened on Rex's harness. "Then we need to protect her, and we need to find out exactly who else was involved before they strike again." Emily stirred again, whispering, "Rex." He stayed. Reyes knelt beside her, voice gentle but firm. "He stayed because he knew you needed him. That's what heroes do, Emily." The small smile that crossed her face, fleeting and fragile, gave Reyes a brief moment of relief. But that relief was short-lived. Morales pulled Reyes aside, holding a printout of surveillance footage from a nearby street. The footage showed the night of the fire. A man running from the abandoned housing area, a tiny German shepherd trailing after him, stopping briefly before turning back toward the building. Rey's eyes narrowed. "He didn't follow the danger," he said quietly. "He followed duty. That dog understood his mission." Morales nodded grimly. "And now we understand the stakes. Whoever orchestrated this knew exactly what they were doing. Emily's life was the pawn, and Rex was the unexpected variable." Hours turned into days. Emily remained in the hospital under observation, while Reyes stayed by her side whenever he could. He watched as Rex's burns began to heal, though the puppy remained cautious, his once carefree energy now subdued by the memory of what he had survived. The bond between child and dog deepened every hour. Emily's small hand fit perfectly into Rex's paw, a connection of trust and gratitude that transcended words. Reyes often found himself staring at the two, silently thanking whatever force had put them together that night. But the sense of danger never left him. The burned notebook, the cryptic notes, the calculated trap, all pointed to a human intelligence behind the chaos. Whoever had done this had underestimated Rex, and by extension, underestimated the loyalty and courage of the tiny hero. Morales leaned against the hospital wall late one night. "We've got a lead on the ex-boyfriend, but it's thin. He has no alibi and no one saw him at the fire except for Rex." Reyes shook his head, looking at the puppy sleeping beside Emily's bed. "He's already given us everything we need, but he's just a puppy. He can't fight this battle alone." Morales nodded. "We'll need to act fast. Whoever planned this may strike again, and next time they may not leave a trail as obvious as a fire." Rey's eyes scanned the room, landing on Emily and Rex. He made a silent promise. No matter what comes next, they will not face it alone. Somewhere, hidden in the shadows, the people responsible for Emily's near death were watching. And they didn't yet realize that the tiniest, bravest hero in Cedar Falls had already outsmarted them once. But the real question lingered, heavy and inescapable. Who else was involved? And would Rex's courage be enough the next time they tried? The city celebrated a miracle. A puppy had saved a child. The world cheered, but the detectives knew the truth. This was only the beginning. Rex stirred, lifting his head, small eyes scanning the room with determination. He had already proven he could run through fire, navigate chaos, and bring help. But there was still one more challenge looming, the human element behind the fire, waiting for the perfect moment to strike again. And as dawn broke over the city, painting the hospital walls in shades of gold and gray, Reyes knew that the fight for Emily's safety had only just begun. By the time dawn broke over Cedar Falls, the city had already caught wind of the miracle that had occurred the night before. News vans crowded the streets outside Cedar Falls General Hospital, reporters jostling for position, cameras flashing incessantly. Social media had exploded, fueled by videos of a small, wet, soot-covered German shepherd cradled by Officer Daniel Reyes as he carried Emily to safety. The puppy had become a national sensation overnight. Hashtags trended across every platform: Rex the Rescuer, Puppy Hero, Child Saved by Dog. The posts were filled with awe, tears, and gratitude. Citizens flooded the hospital with flowers, toys, and donations, hopping to honor the four-legged hero who had risked everything for a child he had never met. But inside the hospital, behind the walls of social media and applause, the story was far from over. Officer Reyes paced the hallways, glancing down at Rex, who now lay exhausted on a soft blanket in the corner of Emily's room. His fur was drying, but the burns on his paws and ears still stung visibly, and he trembled slightly each time someone approached. "Rex, you're a hero," Reyes murmured, crouching beside him. The puppy lifted his head briefly, eyes shining with intelligence and trust, then rested it back on the blanket. It was clear he knew the world was finally acknowledging what he had done, but he wasn't finished yet. Dr. Lillian Chang had just finished examining him again. "He's stable, but he's in shock," she said. "Burns are healing, but emotionally he's been through trauma. You can see it in his eyes." Reyes nodded grimly. "I know, but he saved her, that's what matters." Meanwhile, Emily's parents had arrived. Her mother, still in shock from the events of the night before, clutched her daughter's hand, tears streaking her face. Her father held back sobs as he looked at Rex. I can't believe this little dog saved my daughter," he whispered, voice breaking. Emily stirred slightly and whispered hoarsely, "Rex, I was scared, but he never left me." Rex leaned toward her, pressing his small, still damaged body against her hand. It was an unspoken promise. "I'll protect you, no matter what." But while the public celebrated and news crews broadcast Rex as a hero, Detective Morales and Officer Reyes knew the story had deeper layers. The man rescued from the abandoned building, the ex-boyfriend, had been questioned but remained mostly silent, burned and traumatized, refusing to provide a full explanation. His involvement was clear, but who else had been behind the fire? Rey's phone buzzed. It was the precinct with surveillance updates. Morales and Reyes reviewed the footage together. It was chilling. The ex-boyfriend wasn't alone. Shadowy figures lingered near the perimeter of the duplex that night, watching the chaos, waiting, ensuring the plan unfolded as intended. "They planned this," Morales said, voice low. "They knew Emily would be alone, that the building would be destroyed. They counted on Rex, and they almost got away with it." Rey's jaw tightened. Almost, but Rex beat them. The city's reaction was overwhelming. Crowds gathered outside the hospital, leaving gifts for Rex and Emily. A local news anchor interviewed Reyes and Rex live on television. "How did it feel to see a puppy lead police to save a child?" the reporter asked. Reyes glanced at Rex, whose tail thumped weakly in response to the camera flashes. "He didn't think about himself," Reyes said. "All he cared about was Emily. That's courage." Footage of Rex running through the rain to the police station, carrying the blood-stained note, quickly became viral. Children drew pictures of him, adults wrote emotional posts, and local authorities praised the dog for bravery. Yet, for Reyes, the fame meant little compared to the looming question: who had orchestrated this? Later that evening, A news alert interrupted the calm of the station. The ex-boyfriend had a history not just of violence, but of obsessive behavior linked to control over Emily's mother. Investigators suspected he hadn't acted alone. Someone else had assisted or at least observed. The realization made Reyes uneasy. He found himself staring at Rex again. The puppy, now resting beside Emily, seemed exhausted but alert, as if he understood that the fight wasn't over. Reyes bent down, whispering into his ear, "You saved her, buddy, but we need to find them. They won't stop just because the city cheers." The next morning, social media was flooded with messages of gratitude. Local schools held assemblies honoring Rex, and animal rescue organizations called to congratulate the police department. The story had become more than just a local hero tale. It was a symbol of hope in a city that had forgotten what courage looked like. But Reyes knew the danger was still very real. Detective Morales had pieced together fragments of information, phone records, partial addresses, and a timeline that suggested the ex-boyfriend's accomplices were likely monitoring the hospital, waiting for an opportunity. Meanwhile, Rex's injuries were slowly healing, but his spirit remained tireless. Even as children and reporters visited, he remained intensely aware, his ears twitching at every unfamiliar sound, his eyes scanning the hallways. Reyes understood instinctively that Rex knew something they hadn't yet uncovered. The following day, a meeting was called at the precinct. Morales presented a map of Cedar Falls, marking locations linked to the ex-boyfriend's movements. "He's been spotted in multiple areas over the past month," Morales said. "But this was deliberate. Someone wanted Emily gone, and if we don't act fast, they might try again." Reyes nodded. "Then we'll act fast. Rex already did his part. Now we do ours." Hours later, the ex-boyfriend finally began to speak, his voice hoarse from burns and fear. I didn't want she to live there. It wasn't supposed to." His words trailed off, incoherent, but the implication was clear. Rex, sensing the tension, growled softly. It was the first sound the puppy had made since arriving at the hospital. The growl carried a weight that no human voice could replicate, a warning, a statement of protection. Reyes patted his side. "He knows," he whispered. "He knows we can't let them get away with this." The day wore on, bringing with it an uncomfortable realization. Rex had become more than a hero, he was a key witness. Every movement, every reaction he had displayed during the night of the fire could provide clues. His actions were deliberate, guided by instinct, and perhaps something beyond understanding. As night fell, the hospital quieted. Emily slept peacefully and Rex curled up at the foot of her bed, eyes half closed but alert. Reyes sat beside him, exhausted, reflecting on the events of the past 48 hours. A tiny puppy had run through rain, fire, and danger to save a child. And now, that same puppy would have to inspire the city, guide the investigation, and remain vigilant against those who threatened the life of a 6-year-old girl. Reyes whispered softly to Rex, voice tinged with both awe and resolve. "We've got their attention now, but this isn't over. Whoever did this, they're not finished. And neither are we." Outside, the city buzzed with stories of heroism and hope. But inside the hospital, Reyes and Rex understood the harsh truth. The world could celebrate a hero, but evil doesn't retire just because someone went viral on social media. And somewhere, hidden in the shadows, the people who had orchestrated the fire watched the news reports, unaware that the tiniest, bravest hero in Cedar Falls had already outsmarted them once, and that he was ready for the next challenge. The question lingered, heavy and urgent. Would the city's hero dog and his human allies be enough to stop the next move before it was too late? Rex stirred slightly, tail thumping once. A heartbeat of courage, a promise of vigilance, a silent declaration. "I will not let them hurt her again." The city of Cedar Falls was still buzzing from the news of the miraculous rescue, but inside Officer Daniel Reyes' precinct, the atmosphere was tense, electric, and brimming with unspoken fear. The ex-boyfriend, the man responsible for Emily's near-fatal trap, had been taken into custody, but his arrest was far from the end of the story. Detective Morales paced the small conference room, a thick file clutched in his hands. "He has accomplices," Morales said, voice low but urgent. "We've traced several calls, locations, and financial transfers. This wasn't a one-man operation. Someone else is out there, watching, waiting for their next move." Ray's hand clenched into a fist. He glanced at Rex, who sat quietly at his feet, his body tense and ears perked. The puppy's gaze followed every movement, alert to every whisper. "We can't let them get near Emily again," Ray said, voice tight. Morales nodded grimly. "We need to move fast. If they've planned once, they'll plan again, and this time they may not leave a trail as obvious as fire." That night the hospital was unusually quiet. Emily slept in her room, monitors beeping softly, while Ray's kept a vigilant eye on Rex. The puppy had been quiet all day, licking her hand occasionally, nuzzling her arm and letting her rest in relative peace. But Ray's noticed subtle changes, twitches in Rex's ears, low growls when shadows moved in the hallway, a vigilance that never waned. It was around midnight when the call came in. A security alarm had tripped at the small apartment complex where Emily's mother had recently moved for safety. The dispatcher's voice crackled over the radio. "Officer Reyes, Detective Morales, you need to respond immediately. Possible intruder at 42 Maple Street. Security cameras show someone matching the ex-boyfriend's description." Ray's heart raced. "We're on it," he said. He grabbed his coat and carefully lifted Rex into his arms. The puppy's small body shivered against his chest, but his eyes, sharp and alert, scanned the surroundings as if he already knew danger was near. The precinct team moved quickly, sirens cutting through the night. When they arrived at the apartment, Ray's noted the eerie silence. The building was dark except for the dim glow of a hallway light. The security footage had shown movement, but no one was visible outside. Ray's set Rex down. The puppy's paws barely made a sound on the concrete floor, but his body was coiled with tension. He sniffed the air, ears pricked, tail low but stiff. Inside the apartment, the team moved cautiously. Ray's took the lead, flashlight sweeping over walls, furniture, and doorways. Every creak and shadow made Rex tense further, growling softly. Then they saw him. The ex-boyfriend had somehow managed to escape custody temporarily, or perhaps someone had helped him. He stood near the living room window, holding a small duffel bag, eyes darting nervously. "Freeze!" Ray's shouted, drawing his weapon. The man's face twisted in panic. He bolted, diving for the door, but Rex reacted instantly. The puppy leapt, small but fearless, landing on the man's ankle, snapping with teeth that didn't bite to kill, but enough to slow him down. The man stumbled, cursing, giving Ray's just enough time to tackle him to the ground. Ray's pinned him, heart pounding. "You're not going anywhere, not tonight." Rex barked once fiercely, a warning that made the man flinch. The puppy's gaze never left him, unyielding, full of purpose. Detective Morales arrived moments later, securing the ex-boyfriend. "He won't be leaving again," Morales said, nodding at Rex. The tension in the apartment hung thick. Everyone knew this could have ended badly. But Rex, small and battered, had once again become the key to protecting a child's life. Back at the hospital, Emily slept peacefully, oblivious to the danger that had lurked just blocks away. Ray's carried Rex back to her room, exhausted but relieved. The puppy climbed onto the bed beside her, nudging her hand gently. "You did it again," Ray's whispered, scratching behind Rex's ears. "You protected her, you saved her." But the night wasn't over. The ex-boyfriend, stubborn and defiant even in custody, had only revealed fragments of the plan. Through careful questioning and cross-referencing phone records, detectives began to piece together the shocking truth. The fire, the trap, the abandoned building, it had all been part of a bigger, more calculated scheme to isolate Emily. "She wasn't just a victim of his obsession," Morales said, face grave. "He had partners. He wanted control, and now that plan's been interrupted, they may escalate." Ray's jaw tightened. Then we need to be ready. No one leaves her alone, not for a second. The next morning, the story of Rex's bravery exploded across the nation. News networks ran footage of the night's confrontation, showing the tiny puppy bravely leaping at a grown man, stopping him in his tracks. People across the country marveled at the courage of a dog who had already saved a child once, and now had acted again to protect her. Rex became more than a hero. He became a symbol of resilience and loyalty, a small, determined force against darkness. Crowds gathered outside the hospital, leaving gifts, notes, and treats for the dog that had captured hearts everywhere. Emily's mother, tearful and exhausted, approached Rex carefully. You saved my daughter twice," she whispered. Rex sniffed her hand gently, tail wagging slightly. Emily, waking briefly, smiled weakly. "Rex," she murmured. Ray's watched silently, pride and awe swelling in his chest. He had trained for years, faced countless dangers, but he had never witnessed courage like this. Not in a human, not in a child, not in anyone, but in a tiny German shepherd, battered and brave, willing to risk everything. Yet even as the city celebrated, Reyes and Morales knew the truth. The ex-boyfriend was just one piece of a larger, darker puzzle. Whoever else had orchestrated the fire, whoever had counted on Emily's isolation, was still out there. And Rex, tiny but fearless, had already proven he was ready for the next challenge. As dusk fell over Cedar Falls, Reyes sat beside Rex in Emily's room, gently stroking his fur. "They'll be back," he whispered, voice low but firm. "And when they are, we'll be ready. You'll make sure of it." Rex looked up at him, eyes gleaming with an almost human understanding. Then he nudged Emily's hand gently, reminding everyone present, heroes don't always wear badges, and courage doesn't always come in large packages. Sometimes it comes on 4 paws. The city celebrated a hero, but in the shadows, those who had tried to destroy Emily's life watched, unaware that the smallest, bravest hero in Cedar Falls was ready to protect her again. The night ended, but the story was far from over. Reyes knew that the ex-boyfriend's capture was just a temporary victory. The real threat, the network of people who had planned this, was still out there, and Rex, battered, exhausted, but unyielding, would be the first line of defense when they returned. As he lay at Emily's feet, tiny chest rising and falling in shallow but steady breaths, Reyes whispered, "No one will hurt you, Emily. Not while Rex is here, not while I'm here, and not while we're together." Rex responded with a soft bark, tail wagging faintly. It was a promise, a warning, a declaration. And somewhere in the shadows beyond the city's edge, eyes watched, plotting, waiting, unaware that their smallest adversary had already proven he could outmatch their cruelty. Cedar Falls was quiet that night, a deceptive calm settling over the city as the last of the evening news stories about Rex's heroism flickered across screens. But inside the hospital, Officer Daniel Reyes felt no peace. Emily's room was dimly lit, the monitors casting a rhythmic glow over her fragile form. She slept, still weak, still recovering, but the events of the past week had left her exhausted in every sense, physically, emotionally, and mentally. Rex lay at the foot of her bed, small body pressed to the floor, breathing shallow but steady. The puppy's burns were healing, yet the trauma from the fire, the chase, and the confrontation with the ex-boyfriend had left him jittery and hyper-aware. Every sound outside the room made his ears twitch. Every footstep in the hallway drew his eyes upward, alert and vigilant. Reyes sat in the chair beside Rex, his head in his hands, replaying the sequence of events in his mind. The fire, the note, Rex's run through the storm, the confrontation with the ex-boyfriend, all of it was like a relentless drumbeat he couldn't ignore. Somewhere out there, the remaining conspirators were plotting, waiting for the perfect moment to strike again. And he knew instinctively that Rex's courage alone wouldn't be enough if they weren't careful. The door to the room creaked. Reyes stiffened. His hand went to his sidearm, but it was only Nurse Karen checking Emily's IV. "She's stable," Karen whispered. "But she's still weak. She needs rest. Reyes nodded silently, lowering his hand. Rex let out a low growl, soft but unmistakable, and the nurse froze, glancing down at the tiny German shepherd. "He's protective, isn't he?" she asked. Reyes smiled faintly, exhausted. "More than protective, he's extraordinary." Hours passed. The night deepened, and a storm rolled back in, rain hammering against the windows, lightning briefly illuminating the quiet hospital wing. Rex's growls became more frequent, his body tensing as if responding to an invisible presence. Reyes followed Rex's gaze. The shadows outside the window seemed to twist unnaturally. And then, a faint noise. A scraping, almost imperceptible, coming from the hallway just beyond the nurse's station. Reyes stood abruptly, signaling Rex to stay. The puppy's eyes were sharp, focused on the doorway. Every instinct told Reyes that someone had breached the hospital's perimeter. His heart pounded in his chest, adrenaline surging. He moved toward the door, flashlight cutting through the darkness. The hallway was empty, eerily silent except for the storm outside. He paused, listening, when a shadow flickered at the far end. "Stop right there," Reyes shouted, drawing his weapon. No one responded, but Rex growled louder, moving toward the shadow with a low, threatening snarl. His small body quivered with both fear and determination. Then the shadow moved again. Reyes' flashlight caught it, a figure, hooded and swift, trying to slip past the nurse's station undetected. Reyes lunged, grabbing the intruder by the shoulder. The figure spun, and in a split second, Reyes recognized the face. A younger man, one of the ex-boyfriend's known associates, the last link in the chain of people who had orchestrated the fire. The man tried to pull away, but Rex was already on him, teeth snapping, small body leaping with courage that seemed almost supernatural. The struggle drew the attention of the night staff, who rushed in to assist. The intruder was restrained, groaning and struggling, but Rex remained relentless, refusing to release until the man was fully subdued. Reyes' heart was pounding as he secured the man in handcuffs. "You're not going anywhere," he said firmly. The nurse who had discovered the intruder approached, wide-eyed. I don't understand. He just appeared." Reyes shook his head. He wasn't supposed to be here, but Rex knew before anyone else did. He saved the hospital, too. Back in Emily's room, the little girl had stirred slightly. Rex returned to her side, pressing his small body against her hand. Reyes watched, awestruck. The tiny dog had once again proven himself the guardian of not just a child's life, but the safety of everyone around her. Hours later, Morales arrived with additional officers and a portable evidence kit. "We traced the intruder's movements," he explained. "He was scouting the hospital, trying to see if he could get close to Emily without being noticed. That dog, your hero, foiled their plan before it even started." Reyes looked down at Rex, who now lay panting but alert. "He doesn't even know how amazing he is," Reyes said softly. Morales smiled grimly. "He doesn't need to know. What matters is he's already kept her safe twice, and if the rest of the network tries anything, he'll do it again." The night dragged on. Emily slept through it all, oblivious to the danger lurking just beyond the hospital doors. But Reyes knew this was only the beginning. Whoever had orchestrated the fire, whoever had counted on her isolation, was not finished. And Rex, though small and battered, had already shown an instinctive understanding of the threats that humans often overlooked. The storm outside intensified, wind rattling the windows, rain hammering like a drumbeat against the roof. Reyes stayed awake, watching over both Emily and Rex, fully aware that the calm could be shattered at any moment. Suddenly, Rex's ears perked. He growled low and steady, a warning that made Reyes freeze. The sound came from the room's doorway, a faint scratching, almost imperceptible over the storm. Reyes' heart raced. "Stay," he whispered to Rex. The door creaked open slightly. A figure slipped through the hallway, moving cautiously toward the room. But Rex was faster. The puppy leapt, barking fiercely, teeth teeth snapping at the intruder's heels. The figure froze, startled by the courage and ferocity of such a small animal. Reyes moved quickly, tackling the intruder to the floor. The struggle was brief. The intruder was restrained. It was another young man connected to the ex-boyfriend, a scout sent to test the hospital's security. Reyes stood, breathing heavily. He looked at Rex, who was still growling softly, tail stiff, eyes scanning for any other danger. "You've done it again," Reyes whispered. "You've saved her again." Rex nudged Emily's hand gently, as if assuring her that he was there to protect her no matter what. The bond between child and dog had grown deeper than ever, an unspoken connection forged in fire, fear, and courage. Detective Morales stepped forward. "They're not done," he said, "but we've got a pattern now. They're watching, testing, waiting for an opening, and Rex, he's our best early warning system." Reyes nodded, exhaustion mixed with pride. The tiny German Shepherd had already saved a child twice, defended a hospital, and outsmarted dangerous criminals. Yet the question remained, how much more could this small, brave puppy endure? The night faded into early morning, the storm finally subsiding. Emily slept peacefully, unaware of the chaos that had surrounded her. Rex lay at her feet, still alert, small chest rising and falling, ears twitching at every sound. Reyes sat beside him, whispering into the quiet room, "No one's going to hurt you, Emily. Not while he's here, not while I'm here, and not while we're together." Rex responded with a soft bark, a small but unmistakable declaration, "I will protect her, always." And somewhere, beyond the city's edge, the remaining conspirators watched, unaware that the smallest, bravest hero in Cedar Falls was ready to meet whatever came next. The night had proven one thing: courage doesn't depend on size, determination doesn't depend on strength, and loyalty can come on 4 paws. But the true test was still to come. Because the shadows lurking outside had one more move, dawn broke over Cedar Falls with a pale, uncertain light. The city's streets were wet from the storms of the past days, shimmering under the first rays of morning. Inside Cedar Falls General Hospital, the calm was deceptive. Officer Daniel Reyes sat in the small chair beside Emily's bed, eyes glued to the monitors and to the small German Shepherd curled at her feet. Rex had slept only a little, yet his vigilance never wavered. Every twitch of his ears, every flicker of his eyes, betrayed a readiness that no human could match. Emily stirred, blinking slowly as she woke. Her eyes fell on Rex immediately, and she smiled weakly, reaching for him. The puppy nudged her hand, tail wagging faintly but still tense, as if reminding her, "I'm here. I won't leave." Reyes noticed the change immediately. Rex's ears perked, body stiffened, and low growls began to emanate from deep in his chest. Something was coming. Reyes' phone buzzed with an alert. Security cameras outside the hospital had detected movement. Morales' voice came over the line, tense and urgent. "Daniel, they're here. The ex-boyfriend and his accomplices, they've coordinated a strike. They know she's here. They're coming for her." Reyes' blood ran cold. He looked down at Rex, whose small form trembled slightly but remained alert. The puppy's eyes met his with a clarity that was almost human. "We can stop them. We must stop them." The hospital's security team moved quickly to reinforce entrances, but Reyes knew the real line of defense wasn't metal detectors or locked doors. It was Rex. Minutes later, the first intruder appeared in the emergency exit corridor. A man in black clothing, hooded, moving silently, scanning for weakness. He did not know he was about to face something far more formidable than expected. Rex leapt to his feet. His small body shot forward, teeth snapping, fur bristled. The intruder froze for a brief moment, stunned by the courage and intensity emanating from the tiny German Shepherd. Then, a struggle ensued, a flurry of teeth, barks, and snarls that drove the intruder back, giving Reyes and the security team precious seconds to apprehend him. The rest of the accomplices were not far behind. 2 more men entered from a side corridor, moving with determination, thinking a child would be defenseless. They had underestimated the smallest hero in Cedar Falls. Rex positioned himself between Emily and the intruders, low growl vibrating in his chest. His eyes burned with intelligence and focus. He was fast, fearless, and completely dedicated to his mission: protect Emily at all costs. Reyes moved forward, gun drawn, directing the security team to strategic positions. The intruders, realizing they were met with both human and canine opposition, hesitated. That hesitation was all Rex needed. The puppy darted between their legs, snapping, nipping, and creating chaos. His size was no disadvantage. It was a surprise weapon, unpredictably agile and fierce. Emily, frightened but sensing safety with Rex beside her, clung to the bed, tears in her eyes. Reyes whispered, "He's got this. He'll protect you, just stay back." The fight continued with relentless intensity. Rex's courage inspired the humans around him, giving them the edge they needed. The intruders were cornered, tripping over furniture and the puppy's strategic maneuvers, unable to reach Emily. Finally, with one last coordinated effort, the security team, led by Reyes, subdued the intruders completely. They were handcuffed, restrained, and taken into custody. The ex-boyfriend's remaining network had been dismantled. The threat that had loomed over Emily for weeks was gone, neutralized by courage, intelligence, and unyielding loyalty. Emily's mother ran to her daughter's side, sobbing. "You're safe, sweetie. You're safe," she whispered, clutching Emily to her chest. Emily wrapped her arms around Rex, who pressed his small body against her, tail wagging weakly, exhausted but victorious. Reyes knelt beside them, stroking Rex's fur gently. "You did it, buddy. You kept her safe no matter what. You're a hero, the bravest I've ever met." Rex, battered and burned, wagged his tail faintly, licking Emily's hand. His eyes were tired but gleaming with a quiet triumph. He had faced fire, danger, and human cruelty, and he had prevailed. Detective Morales entered, shaking his head in awe. "I've seen bravery in humans before, Daniel. I've never seen anything like this. This dog has saved a child, protected a hospital, and stopped a criminal network. He's more than a hero. He's a legend." Outside, news crews broadcast the story live. Cedar Falls was captivated. Images of Rex at Emily's side, small yet fearless, spread across social media, national networks, and local papers. The story went viral. #Rex the hero, puppy protector, child saved again. But for Reyes, Morales, and Emily's family, the celebration was secondary to the truth they had witnessed. Courage did not depend on size, strength, or age. Courage could come from a 6-year-old child who survived against impossible odds, from a human officer who refused to give up, and from a tiny German shepherd whose heart was bigger than any threat. Emily, now awake, looked at Rex with gratitude and awe. "You saved me," she whispered, voice trembling. Rex nudged her hand, tail wagging faintly. "It was an unspoken promise. I will always be here." Reyes looked down at the puppy, his own eyes misting. "You're more than a dog, Rex," he murmured. "You're a guardian. You've saved a life and shown the world what bravery truly is." The storm outside had finally passed, leaving the city bathed in a soft morning light. Cedar Falls had witnessed a miracle, a small but mighty force of courage that had toppled evil and protected innocence. In the following days, the ex-boyfriend and his accomplices were fully apprehended, their network dismantled, and Emily's safety guaranteed. Authorities praised Rex, awarding him honorary recognition, while Emily's family vowed to provide a life of love, care, and security for the puppy who had risked everything. Rex recovered slowly, his burns healing, but the experience had changed him. He was no longer just a puppy. He was a symbol of resilience, bravery, and loyalty, inspiring everyone who knew his story. Reyes often sat beside Emily and Rex, watching them play in the small hospital garden, a sense of peace settling over him. The city had celebrated the hero dog, but those who truly understood the magnitude of what had happened knew this. Rex had faced fear, danger, and human cruelty, and he had prevailed with courage that no one could match. Emily leaned against Rex's side, smiling through tears. "I'll never forget you," she whispered. Rex licked her cheek, tail wagging softly. Ray smiled, knowing that for this small, brave German shepherd, the battle had been won, but the legend had just begun. Rex had shown the world what it meant to be fearless, loyal, and selfless. He had run into fire, confronted danger, and protected life with a courage that inspired all who witnessed it. And in Cedar Falls, the story of a tiny hero who ran through the rain, faced fire, outsmarted criminals, and saved a child would be remembered forever. Rex lay beside Emily, finally resting fully exhausted but triumphant. His eyes, half closed, still gleamed with intelligence, bravery, and an unbreakable bond with the child he had saved. The city had learned his name. The world had learned his courage. And Emily, forever safe, had learned the meaning of loyalty, bravery, and the miraculous bond between a child and her hero. Some heroes don't wear badges. Some heroes don't carry weapons. Some heroes come on four paws, small and brave, running through fire to save a life, and in doing so, they change the world forever.